talk about the Fast and the Furious. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. As part of my 2020 13 Nights of Halloween series, today I'm going to be talking about the 1983 supernatural horror film, Christine. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, ranked lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all that extra content. Christine stars Keith Gordon, John Stockwell, and Alexandra and was directed by John Carpenter. Based on Stephen King's 1983 novel of the same name, it tells the story of geeky teenager Arnie Cunningham, played by Keith Gordon, who experiences a transformation of sorts after restoring a 1958 Plymouth Fury named Christine. Christine was the second Stephen King book I ever read. I actually got this book and Cujo at the same time, but opted to read Cujo first because I like dogs more than cars. So I really liked Cujo, but I gotta say that Christine was the book that made me like Stephen King. There was just something about the writing of this one that hooked me. I mean, I read this book in 7th grade and haven't reread it since, but I can still vividly remember how certain things were described or some of the extremely colorful dialogue from a few of the characters. But there was something about this one that really connected with me in a way that I didn't expect at all, and really put me on the path to becoming the lifelong Stephen King fan that I am. As was my customary MO back in the day, I watched this film adaptation of Christine for the first time only about a week after finishing the book. Like any movie based on a book, this film makes quite a few changes from the source material, but I still think it's one of the better Stephen King adaptations. The things that are altered or simplified don't really have a big impact on the core of the film. The only substantial change is Christine's origins, and while I like that aspect from the book, I think the more mysterious, unexplained route that the film takes really works too, and is honestly probably the better, more concise way to tell the story in a movie format. Christine's a movie about transformations, and the number of levels that this theme works at in this film is insane. At its core, this is really a coming-of-age story. Our main human characters are teenagers. We've got the jock, the prettiest girl in school, and then we've got the bullied, outcast loser, Arnie Cunningham. Even if this were your typical high school movie, there would be some transformations of these characters and their relationships with one another. But this isn't your typical high school movie, all because of a cherry red 1958 Plymouth Fury. Instead, we've got a coming-of-age story where the transformations are more literal than normal. And not only that, but they're mirrored, which is one of the most fascinating things about this movie. Arnie's inexplicably drawn to Christine, and after he buys her, they're inextricably linked. Both Arnie and Christine start off the movie on the rough side. Arnie's your stereotypical bullied nerd, and Christine's one step away from the scrap pile. But they find each other, and something changes. It all starts off very subtly. We see Christine slowly getting restored the longer Arnie works on her at the garage, and we see some slight changes in Arnie too. He starts to gain a bit more confidence, and even stops wearing his glasses. But then things start to get a bit more noticeable. It's not long before Christine looks like a brand new car just rolling off the assembly line. And Arnie's basically an entirely different person too, transforming from a nice nerd into a rebel without a cause greaser. And while both he and Christine exhibit a physical transformation, Christine's transformations are a little bit more extreme and fun to watch. From the show me scene on, we get some really awesome reverse practical effects that still look great today. It's crazy to think that Christine's transformations were originally all planned to be off-screen, and that these shots were filmed and added as an afterthought. One of the biggest challenges that this film faces is the need to get across to the audience just how much time passes in this story. There are a few on-screen dates shown and a couple references to holidays, but I do think it struggles to really sell that passage of time. So there are definitely a few things that feel pretty rushed, mostly all related to Arnie's relationships with Lee and Dennis. Amazingly, the overall pacing of the story is great though. It does a fantastic job building up the tension with Christine. We get the sense that something's a little off right away, but it takes until about halfway through the movie before we get a real sense of what Christine's capable of. And even then, this movie does a good job of never quite making it clear who's responsible for everything happening until the very end. This could have been an easy movie to mess up. Even with a good script and the interesting characters, the premise of a killer car could have come off as entirely goofy rather than ominous and threatening. So I think a ton of credit needs to go to director John Carpenter. It's funny, it was only a few reviews ago with Carrie that I was complaining about a director's style conflicting with the story, but here it enhances it. John Carpenter's a pro when it comes to creating atmosphere, and this movie's no different. The tension and suspense are there, and so you can really buy into this premise. And of course, Carpenter's score doesn't hurt either. One of my favorite things about this movie has always been the lighting, especially in scenes involving Christine. That highway fire scene is something else. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one is definitely Arnie and Christine. So this works on two fronts, them individually as characters, and then them together as this linked, transformed monster. It might sound a little silly to consider a car a character in a movie, but I think Christine has just as much of a presence, personality, and arc in this movie as just about anybody else. The transformations that she and Arnie exhibited are pretty startling in the context of the story, and the strange link that they share is compelling. The basis behind that connection and Christine's powers are explained in the book, but it's left a mystery here, and I gotta say, I kinda like that. She's just evil from the day she rolls off the line. No explanation required or given. The second pro is the tension. This movie does a fantastic job building up the suspense and mystery of the story. I mean, this is kind of a variant of a slasher movie when you think about it, but it's not structured like one. It's far more of a character-driven slow burn, and that might be surprising to people coming in expecting this chaotic car carnage. Things don't really start to ramp up until the second half, but it's so well structured in its tension building that it's worth the wait. John Carpenter is able to skillfully take something kind of goofy sounding and make it scary. Like I said, this is basically a slasher, but instead of a killer in a mask, it's two murderous tons of chrome and steel bearing down on you. On the con side, my only real issue is how periodically rushed certain aspects of this movie feel. The overall pacing's actually really good, it's just certain aspects of Arnie's character that feel a little sudden. It's mostly a consequence of having to condense 500 pages into a 2-hour movie, but much of the teen issues middle section of the film feels like it kinda comes out of nowhere. The whole relationship with Lee flies by, and if it weren't for her involvement in the third act, that entire relationship section would have felt pretty pointless. It's not a huge issue or anything, but it's definitely something I notice every time I watch the movie. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Christine or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Christine 4 out of 5 paws. This has always been one of my favorite Stephen King books, and I had kind of forgotten just how good the movie is, too. Great story, great characters, and some great tension and atmosphere. I would recommend Christine to anybody interested in a good, solid horror movie with interesting characters and a nice, tense build-up. I really think most horror fans will enjoy this one, and even people looking to dip their toes into the genre should have a good time with it. And if you're a car person, especially someone who likes classic cars, there's going to be a lot to like in this one for you. If you liked Christine, I would recommend Duel. It's another tense car-based thriller and was actually Steven Spielberg's directorial debut. Plus, one of the main vehicles in that movie is another Plymouth. If you like John Carpenter's style here, you should check out The Fog. The story's quite a bit different, but it's another great atmospheric movie that uses lighting to create some pretty cinematic shots. And if you like the idea of an evil sentient vehicle, you might want to watch Rubber. It's a weird one, but it follows a sentient killer tire with telekinetic powers as it wreaks havoc on anything and anyone it rolls across. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Christine? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite movie where a car could be considered a character? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insider information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe or add it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.